Okay, this weekend we're going to be wrapping up the gunpowder empires. So the Ottomans tend to be the most discussed, and the Safavids are usually seen just more as a trend related to the Ottomans. So we're going to focus in on the Ottomans. The Mughals will become much more important later, but there are some key points you need to know about them. So tonight we're going to talk about the rise of the Ottoman Empire, the social and economic developments in the Ottoman Empire, and the reasons for the decline of the Ottoman Empire. So if you didn't already, you can number these notes. Number 16. And so some Middle East reminders, some things that are important to keep in mind to contextualize the Ottomans, is that the Seljuk Turks dominate the Abbasid dynasty in early 1200s. So they conquer a great deal of land from the Abbasids, who were, again, the existing Islamic Empire in the Middle East, and also part of the Byzantine Empire, the Seljuk Turks conquer. So this greatly weakens the Abbasid dynasty. Then the Mongols finished the Abbasid dynasty off in 1258. And so just a reminder, because our unit exam is coming up, our final exam, that the first two Islamic empires are the Umayyad dynasty and the Abbasid dynasty. Again, just a reminder, the Umayyad dynasty is really well known for military conquest and massive spreading of the Islamic Empire, and the Abbasids are most known for their golden age and all the inventions and new ideas that occurred at the House of Wisdom and the translation of the Greek texts, as well as spreading to North and West Africa. So Timbuktu becomes a great center of learning of Muslim studies, etc. Then we have a group of Turkish people called the Ottomans that begin to gain control in Anatolia, which is in the eastern portion of Turkey. So it's the eastern portion of the Byzantine Empire, what the Seljuks had conquered of it. And so the Ottomans kind of hang out and gain power. They're also near the Black Sea, which is today like the country of Georgia, below south of Russia. And so they're just kind of gaining their power. But they haven't yet conquered the Byzantines. Remember, that doesn't happen until 1453. And as the Mongol rule fades in the Middle East, the Ottomans begin to build an empire. More to come on that in a moment. So we have our three gunpowder empires, the Ottoman Empire, which, as you can see, conquered the Byzantine Empire and took over and expanded even into the Arabian Peninsula and Egypt. We have our Safavid Empire in the Middle East, Persian portion of the Middle East, and then the Mughal Empire, which is going to spread Muslim influence into India. So our gunpowder empires are built by military strength because they have gunpowder. So they use modern weapons like firearms and artillery. And it's important to know that that gunpowder comes from China, who invented it. So we have our three Muslim gunpowder empires, the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. The Mughals are established by a descendant of the Mongols, and that's why it sounds so similar, but who had converted to Islam and became a Muslim leader. So Ottoman military strength, here's a drawing depicting it, but the Ottomans are arguably the strongest of our gunpowder empires. And they modeled their technology and training of European armies. So we talked about the Janissaries and how they took European boys to fight in their armies, and they often mimicked our European armies. So they had Janissaries, which are the enslaved Christian boys that were trained as soldiers, and they are the most powerful group in the military. So they're like the military generals. And they tried to translate military power into positions in the government, which we're going to see later in the Ottoman Empire does succeed. Not to the emperor's role, but very high up government officials. The Janissaries take over those roles. So, Ottoman expansion. We see here they're climbing a walled city, and that is the wall. Those are the walls of Constantinople. So in 1453, the Ottomans invade Constantinople. They break through those famous Theodosian walls that, again, there's one, and then 20 feet later there's another, and they're massive. But the Ottomans finally conquer and sack the city of Constantinople. And that is the end of the Byzantine Empire. So 1453 should sound very familiar, especially on an essay exam, because it is the beginning of Unit 3, end of Unit 2. And that's one of the reasons that we start Unit 3 when we do. This huge shift from the Byzantine Empire to a major Islamic power. The Ottoman political organization, you have the Sultan at the top, who is an absolute monarch, so they have absolute power, and they get their power from God. Then below them, we have the viziers, who are the chief advisors. They run the bureaucracy, and below the viziers are the bureaucracy themselves. So we have those administrators, those janissaries, religious leaders. And in later years, the viziers actually run the government. The sultans are too busy enjoying themselves and being self-indulgent to run the government. I guess one note I will make is a reference to Aladdin. You think of Jafar, he was a vizier. He was the advisor to the Sultan. And so remember, he had, evil intentions, but not all of them did. But he had a lot of power. So Ottoman Empire, the social developments. It was a heavy warrior aristocracy, meaning the warriors made the most money and were the aristocrats, the noble people in the society. So there's the ruling class at the top, then there's merchants and artisans, and the ruling class consists of the nobility, the warriors, and the viziers, etc. Then at the bottom we have peasants who worked for their landlords, had heavy taxes, were often uprising. And the coffee house was the center of cultural and social life. It's where people got together, came up with new ideas, and did all the changes that occurred socially occurred because of meetings in coffee houses. Ottomans are Sunni Muslims, not Shia Muslims, and they conquered a very diverse empire. Think of Egypt, think of the Arabian Peninsula, think of into Eastern Europe. So there was a fair amount of autonomy for the newly conquered subjects. Christians and Jews, our people of the book, are still allowed to be Christian and Jewish, but they have to pay a special tax, similar to the Abbasids and the Umayyads. And only Muslims could serve in the government and the military. So this, again, was one of the Janissaries had to be converted, but the fact that they were of Christian origin limited how high they could climb. So Suleiman is the Magnificent. He is one of our famous sultans, and he built up the military power. And as you can see on this map, underwent great expansion. He was responsible for expanding all through Eastern Europe and much of North Africa. So he pushed to conquer parts of Europe, but he halted at Vienna, which is in Austria, right next to Germany. And he significantly weakened Eastern Europe. Think of Greece. What used to be there was the Byzantine Empire. Suleiman encouraged development of the arts, and under him there was an Ottoman golden age, so arts, writing, etc. Economic developments of the Ottoman Empire. Sorry, I got interrupted. The economy is geared entirely towards warfare and expansion. So when you expand, you get more people to pay taxes, you get more resources under your control, and that improves your economy. The regional world, the Ottomans were open to trade, especially under Suleiman. So they were open to learning about other regions. They weren't closed off. They tried to trade with Europe as much as possible, but again, this is during the time when Europe is exploring and finding other ways to go around the Middle East. They didn't want to deal with the Muslim empires. And then the Ottoman Empire reconstructs Constantinople, which again is on the Bosphorus Strait, connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. And so through that the reason it comes up again is because it was our famous cathedral, North Africa, West Constantinople. And we talked about what happens when the Ottomans conquer, but take a minute to consider great trade advantage, especially over, say, the Seljuks and the Safavids, who weren't creating these navies and trading that way. There it is again. You can see the minarets, which again are an Muslim influence. And so they built minarets and they converted the Hagia Sophia into a mosque. Again, the minarets are, one, to be closer to Allah, two, so that all citizens could easily find a mosque when they had to pray 5 times a day, and three, it's where our Muslim imam, the priest, would climb up and start the call to prayer to tell people when it was time to pray. So this is the inside. Again, you can see people down on the ground. They're doing their prayer. But the Hagia Sophia is a great example of the blending of our earlier Byzantine, Greek Orthodox style culture and our Muslim cultures. Here's some more images. If you notice up at the top along the walls, they, rather than totally reconstructing and redecorating the inside of the cathedral, since there really weren't that many Christian symbols, they added these pennants, pennants with Arabic on them. So some say parts of the Quran, some say Allah, etc. And so the Ottoman decline, again, it all falls down. The Ottoman Empire lasts for nearly 600 years because of their military strength. So from 1281 to 1922. And there's something that ends in 1919 that starts to push for this decline, and it is World War I. But the decline is a long process. The Ottoman Empire begins to weaken and have internal struggle in the 1700s, and this is very similar to Rome. Their decline took hundreds of years, just like the Ottomans. The empire grew too large to maintain. First, they lose ground in in Eastern Europe. Then they lose ground in Egypt, etc. And eventually, by the time World War I starts, it's simply part of Turkey. And so they're just a small little empire trying to struggle to remain. The Ottomans also did not have resources to support their growing army and bureaucracy that were demanding more and more. Again, my PowerPoint sarcasm is that we have never, ever, ever heard of this happening before. It should be familiar, especially to Rome and our other civilizations that have declined. Okay, our last slide is the reasons for decline. The first reason for Ottoman decline is the growing corruption among officials. We're going to see this, but even the Janissaries start to take part in this corruption. And we have weak leaders who are not able to stop the corruption. And so we start to have factions break up within the Ottomans and vie for power. And so that's where we get issues with succession. They're fighting over who should take power. And so that causes a lot of conflict. The military starts to weaken. The Janissaries want more and more power, and they block military changes to protect their own power. They don't want to reorganize the military. That would take them out of the top. Military skills also start to fall behind. The Ottomans aren't trading as much with the Europeans, and the Europeans are building overseas empires and learning new technologies and strengthening their guns and creating cannons and creating naval or sea ship technologies. And the Ottomans aren't keeping up as fast. And lastly, we have economic decline. So there's a decrease in tax revenue because European trade